Oh no. Okay. Every so often, we look back on old films, old TV shows, and various little things that we enjoy quite a bit of in our childhoods. I'm fine with this. What I suddenly find myself doing a lot of when I'm watching films and whatnot is I enjoy going back to a point when I used to enjoy a specific film for a specific reason. And I re-watch that film to see if I still enjoy it on the same level or if I've changed in my opinion of it or changed my viewpoint on why I enjoy a specific film. To give you an example, I used to enjoy High Fidelity because of the fact that Jack Black was in it. That was it. As I've gotten older, I re-watch High Fidelity and I find myself relating occasionally more and more to the Rob character than I could have possibly and should really have ever noticed. I still watch it now, and I still find myself drawn to the music collection, to the idea of the alphabetical or the autobiographical way of organising one's collections, and there's something about the film that still grabs me to this day. Now that's fine. In 2006, a film was released starring Matt Dillon, Owen Wilson, and Kate Hudson. You know the film I'm talking about. You, Me, and Dupree. Well, I watched a bit of this when I was 16. I'll be honest, I was never a massive Owen Wilson fan. To be honest, something about him just rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was a combination of the fact that he was mostly teaming up with Vince Vaughn, and Vince Vaughn really wasn't someone I was a big fan of when I was younger. Now I look at him and I kind of think to myself, okay, he's occasionally funny. But I wouldn't even give him a chance back in 2006. So I didn't really watch You, Me, Dupree that much. I watched a bit of it. It seemed kind of funny. It seemed very stupid in its comedy. And in complete honesty, I watch it now and the whole enjoying and hating a film thing, it works in both directions. You can find something to equally hate about a film that's different from when you used to watch it. I watched it then and I automatically thought of things like, well, I'm not a massive Owen Wilson fan, so I probably won't watch this all the way through. Turn off. I watch it now and I think, my God, the writing, the dialogue, the directing, the setup. What is it? Is this comedy? What is happening? And yet I still find myself watching it all the way through. Because the one thing that I didn't like that much when I was 16, Owen Wilson, there's a strange part of it, me at least at that point, that found him slightly engaging as the character. But I'll explain why in a minute. What's the plot of this? Well, if you haven't seen You, Me, Dupree, then frankly, God bless you and continue to do the Lord's work, I'm just saying. But You, Me, Dupree is a film based where two best friends, Matt Dillon and Owen Wilson, they're not actually called that, they're the actors' names, obviously not the characters' names, and we discover through a various set of scenarios that Dupree, of course the main character played by Owen Wilson himself, has been made homeless and jobless when he went to Matt and Dillon and Kate Hudson's wedding. Now, upon discovering this, Matt Dillon allows him to stay in the house for a couple of days until he gets back on his feet. That's automatically a bad move, right? I mean, they didn't discover this until after they come back from the honeymoon, so it's not completely the worst move you could possibly make as a newly married couple. But by God, how dumb do you really have to be here, Matt Dillon? Eh? And of course he moves in and all the traditional stuff that you would get happens when a married couple has a roommate. He He runs in on them while they're trying to have sex. He has friends over for the game with Matt Dillon and that lot. Oh, and one of the friends in this is played by Seth Rogen, so I kind of thought, oh, I might enjoy this because Seth Rogen's in it. He's not in the film enough, in my opinion. I'm sorry, he's just not. We needed more Seth Rogen and you, me, Dupree. He should have been Dupree, damn it. That's my Seth Rogen fan fighting my Owen Wilson fan. My God, am I an Owen Wilson fan? That can't be right. That just can't be right at all. Ugh. Anyway, so Seth Rogen plays one of the friends, and he, for example, has a whole bunch of the friends over and all this sort of thing. And the couple has a little bit of a... They're having spats because of this problem with the character of Dupree. Oh, and just as a lovely little side project I'd like to point out, Kate Hudson's dad, and a rather weirdly played by Michael Douglas, is trying to constantly annoy, emasculate, and humiliate Matt Dillon. I'm suddenly getting a flashback to everything Ant-Man related. Is Michael Douglas being typecast as like the grumpy, over-excessively protective, and incredibly douchey style father? Because if he is... well done, sir. You have found your niche. There's a point where he even says to the Matt Dillon character, he says, you know, you should get a vasectomy. What? No, seriously. What? When did this... What? Oh! So the film was slightly breaking me. And we get to the point where she decides that, well, yeah, Kate Hudson decides that enough is enough, so Matt Dillon has to kick Owen Wilson out. At this point, the reason why she wants him to get kicked out is that she sets him up on a date with what she thinks is a nurse librarian called Mandy. Quite literally, the only reason why I remember that name is what I'll reveal in a minute. But Owen Wilson 100% then goes on a date with her, and they then come back to the house discovering that the tie is on the doorknob of the house. And if any of you have been in college around the time that you all wanted to live in dorms and were also with girlfriends and going on nights out with girls and everything else, you'll know the code. I wasn't really doing that, and even I know the code. Good lord. But of course, Kate Hudson walks in, and we don't actually see the character of Mandy, which made me think to myself, are they paying tribute to Cheers or Frasier? You know, is Mandy like the Maris Crane or the Vera Piers or something? I don't know Piers. I'm not sure. It was weird to me. But we discover through various formats that he buggers off to go and live with Mandy, saying that because of the magical night they spent together, he's in love with her, and he wants to move in with her based on the fact that he's been kicked out of the house that he's currently mooching into. Which is fine. They go out, Matt Dillon and Kate Hudson, I should say, are the ones who eventually go out and have a nice time. They go out drinking, and they start driving home. They discover that Owen Wilson is sat in the rain, doesn't even duck out of the way when a car comes past and blows water all up in his face or anything like that. You know, pretty basic stuff. And they take him back to the house because apparently Mandy did not want him to move in with her and kicks him out and sends him away and just doesn't want anything more to do with him. We then cut to the, shall we say, the paranoia section of the film, where Matt Dillon is becoming more and more of a dick. Because Michael Douglas is attempting essentially to completely emasculate him and destroy him, he's getting more and more stressed out with the project that he has to do for work, with the fact that he's going to work, the fact that he's dealing with Dupree and his wife on a regular basis. All this stuff is happening to poor Matt Dillon. And of course, over the time, he eventually says to Owen Wilson, he says, "Look, you have to be more helpful around the house." So Owen Wilson says, "Fine, I'll be more helpful around the house," and he does. He helps to fix the wall. He gets a new couch for them. He helps out Kate Hudson with the fact that Kate Hudson is a teacher in this film, by the way. Did anyone have a teacher that was like Kate Hudson? Because if you did, then I'm very freaking jealous of you. I just am. But of course, he helps out with a school class by going and speaking at their career day, where he talks very openly and very passionately about the fact that just because you haven't found your career yet, doesn't mean you're never going to find it. And he's speaking as a 30-something-year-old. Which leads me into my own personal reason as to why I wasn't as much of an Owen Wilson denier as I was before. Don't get me wrong, the guy is annoying. His voice seems to grate on people's nerves. He seems to not really have any decent movies picked in his life. He just seems to be your average schmuck of an actor. But watching this film, I kind of gravitated to him the same way I gravitated to Adam Sandler at one point in my life. He's the adult who doesn't quite have it all together. Now granted, this may be his shtick for a lot of the films that he's in, but I'm sorry. As someone who's not quite got his whole life together sometimes, or doesn't feel like I've got my whole life together sometimes, it's particularly nice to have something like this happen in my life. It's nice to have someone sit there and essentially say to me, it's alright to not have all the answers. It's okay to not be 100% completely and utterly okay with everything. And that's rare. That is rare to have in this section. It's rare to have in some films. At least, not in a way that makes it sound like a parody or trying to make it sound like we're mocking the person who's saying he doesn't have his whole life together. Yeah, I'm saying it. But anyway, he does all this stuff, and Matt Dillon slowly gets more and more jealous because he's bonding with Kate Hudson. Eventually, Kate Hudson's dad comes by, or Michael Douglas comes by, and it all erupts with Matt Dillon going absolutely insane and trying to choke Owen Wilson to death. I'm not a massive Matt Dillon fan, so I'm gonna say, okay, fine. I mean, like I said, I gravitated towards Owen Wilson in this film, but don't get me wrong, I'm still not a fan of the guy. Just ain't gonna happen, man. But, let's face it, he was an alright character, he didn't deserve to be choked. But of course we end up revealing a whole bunch of stuff, up to and including the fact that Michael Douglas was an asshole to him, the fact that he thinks that Owen Wilson is trying to sleep with his wife, and all this wonderful stuff that happens. And we eventually get to a point where Owen Wilson ends up getting a whole bunch of the street kids together, and they go out looking for him. And they discover him drunk in a bar run by Mike from Mike and Molly. Yes, the actor has a name. No, I don't know it. No, I'm not gonna care. Yes, I just brought attention to it for no reason. Ha! But anyway, he finds him in the bar. He gives off a little speech about the fact that, Carl has what's called his Carlness. Now, this has been another, I won't say running motif, because this is the second time it's mentioned. Yeah, apparently twice is enough for a motif now. That makes no sense, film. None whatsoever. Okay? It just doesn't. But anyway, after discussing all of this, they end up going back to Michael Douglas's company where Matt Dillon works. And we then, of course, discover the fact that, they have the little heart-to-heart and the I'm protective of my daughter. Well, I'm her husband now. Okie dokie, let's be friends. Okay, yay! Crap that we usually get with these type of films. And then we get, of course, the obligatory nice happy ending where Matt Dillon and Kate Hudson kiss on the porch of their house after Owen Wilson has found Matt Dillon and brought him back and brought him to his senses and blah, blah, blah. And then the film ends with Owen Wilson being a motivational speaker? Well, I will say this. It's not god-awful. This is the problem with 2006 films. I always seem to find myself saying that they're not so bad half the time whenever I'm watching them. They're not good, but they're not awful either. And sometimes that's worse. When a film is so bad, it's good, you can kind of celebrate that. The same with The Room, or for some people, Batman and Robin perhaps. These films are so bad that people find enjoyment of how bad it is. When a film's really good, there's a reason why we celebrate it, and there's a reason why there's fans for it. But when a film is just meh, I don't know, it kills the momentum of how you should feel about a film. But with that being said, like I said, I'm not against Owen Wilson in this film. I don't particularly enjoy him in most films that he's in, but frankly, in this he's not terrible. Matt Dillon, take him or leave him, I'm not particularly that obsessed with the guy. I don't think he's a bad actor in any way, shape or form, but at the same time, it's not like I've heard much from him over the past 10 years. Yeah, just gonna leave that there for a little bit. And then of course, it all leads into what I think about the cast in general. Well, like I said, Matt Dillon could take him or leave him really in this film. He kind of works as the straight man, but he's not particularly amazing. Owen Wilson, he's Owen Wilson. Kate Hudson, well, Kate Hudson was a great character in Almost Famous. Almost Famous was a great film in my eyes, and frankly speaking, Kate Hudson has very rarely done things wrong in these films. She's pretty funny, she knows how to give off the emotional moments and the serious moments, and frankly speaking, I'm sorry, but I kind of preferred her and Owen Wilson being a happy, chatty couple. True, they'd never actually get together in the film, but at the same time, it's not like you can't deny the chemistry of the two characters. That was the whole point. That's why Matt Dillon went insane. So, frankly, if we'd had the choice, if Owen Wilson had been able to put out a soppy romantic speech out of his ass for her, I wouldn't have objected. I just wouldn't have. But, hey. But let's get into the stuff that's bad about this film. Like I said, the dialogue is okay, but it's trying to be realistic, but it's also trying to be funny and comedic at the same time. And let me tell you something. There are certain writers that can make serious and funny work. Now, I understand that most comedy films do have a fairly decent team of writers behind them, but let's get one thing straight here. We have two different sets of comedies. First off, let's go with the basic Seth Rogen comedy. It's mostly filled with a bunch of what could essentially be referred to as frat guys all hanging out and talking, the main lead with the female lead, and of course, a whole bunch of other stuff in between. Now, the frat boy conversations is all about your basic stupid guy talk the entire time. Now that's fine. But when the main character is with the female character, he doesn't switch out his personality almost right away. He does continues to be more himself around the female lead. That is fine. Take, for example, Knocked Up. Seth Rogen spends most of his time talking to his friend in the most basic of dude ways that you will ever see in your entire life. When he's around the main female lead in that one, Catherine, I want to say Heigl, although I might be wrong, let me know. But here's the problem. Even with all of that stuff going on, it's just not as epic. And it's just not as interesting, you know? So, I'm sorry, but these type of things, they're not quite as epic, and they're not quite as fun. And I mean, a film like this, it just doesn't translate well. The main character does not speak the same way to the female lead as he does to his mates. And that's something that I feel should be translated across. Hell, I think that's something that most comedies should do. You should have a main male lead, or at least the dominating lead of a film, be it the male or the female lead, depending entirely on how you feel at this point in the film, should have a much more conversational with the friend and be slightly more relaxed, slightly more vulgar maybe, or whatever. Unless you're doing a proper prim, posh character, then you can go for the oh posh all the time conversation. This felt more like Matt Dillon was turning into a completely different person around Kate Hudson than he was around, say, Seth Rogen and Owen Wilson. These things just didn't work as well, and I don't know, it slowed the film for me, or at least it made the film slightly less believable. I understand the idea of sometimes a guy talks differently to his wife than to his friends. I understand that, or even his girlfriend for that matter. But at the same time, you shouldn't really lose that. And I think that was the main point of this film. Not to lose yourself in a relationship. Owen Wilson completely throws himself into a relationship believing in the quote-unquote Audrey Hepburn idea. The idea of a woman who's completely perfect for you, having class, poise, a decent set of lungs on her, as well as the ability to be able to chat well with you and your friends. That's where this stuff comes from. Matt Dillon goes into it with the best of intentions, but ultimately isn't quite as underphased as you would believe it to be. Kate Hudson, well, to be honest, she carried the same character all the way through. She's fine. You don't really get to see her with the friends, though. I mean, this is more the Matt Dillon Owen Wilson movie than it ever was a Kate Hudson movie. Which is both okay and a travesty, but to be honest, I can talk about a proper Kate Hudson film next time I do this if I wanted to. Talk about Almost Famous. Now that's a good movie to have. But anyway, what do I think about You, Me and Dupree? Not as bad as I remember it. How about that? Not as bad as I remember it. If you happen to have Netflix, go check it out. If you don't, you can still find it on a DVD somewhere, I'm fairly sure. Not like it's out of sync to find it somewhere on a DVD or in a charity shop, which apparently are now getting more and more open again, which is nice. So, you know what? Celebrate relationships. Celebrate being in one. Celebrate not being in one if that's your fancy. But you know what? Don't get lost in your relationship. Word straight from the Owen Wilson mouth. By God, that's a weird mouth to be attached to, isn't it? Owen Wilson's weird. Randomfish out.